and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and I've got a finished project to share with you today. I have finished my reversible coat. Yay! First of all, I want to say thank you to all the comments on my part one of my, of my fabric haul on Tuesday. My plan, I think I may try and get all three of those parts actually before the new year because I really kind of look at it like an early Christmas gift. So yeah, that's kind of my plan. I think I have 2 more videos of that that'll go up between now and the end of the year. But anyway, thank you. Yes, I'm very fortunate. Very, very lucky girl. Yes, my mentor has fantastic taste, and a lot of people had suggested, you know, maybe you should make something for her so she can still wear some of her stash. Rest assured, she has actually already named me her personal seamstress, and I'm going over and visiting her every week right now and spending a few hours there, and we have already gone through some of her patterns. She saved some of her stash aside, so I am sewing for her. And I'll probably share that stuff with you guys, not on her, but I'll probably share with you the finished things that I'm making for her as well, because it's part of my sewing journey. And she's a she's a gigantic part of my sewing journey. So yeah, I'll share that with you guys as those projects progress as well. Okay, today I have my reversible flat iron coat from the Sewing Workshop, and I'm going to pop a picture of the pattern right here. This pattern comes as both a coat and a jacket. So the jacket is just kind of a shorter cropped length, and the coat obviously is longer. I have made the coat. It is unlined, which makes it perfect for making reversible. Now, the pattern does call for fabric that does not ravel. So you can use like a really stable knit or like a boiled wool or a felted wool, just basically anything that doesn't ravel. Because in the instructions, it tells you how to do a lapped seam. So there are 5/8 inch seam allowance included on the coat, but it tells you where to cut those seam allowances off. So a lapped seam, for those of you that don't know, normally, if this is fabric, you know, this is the wrong side of fabric and this is the right side of fabric. Normally you're sewing fabric right sides together. Right sides together, and then, you know, you flip them open and you've got your seam that's here. With a lapped seam, you cut the seam allowance off one side, and then you mark the seam allowance on the other one with like a chalk pencil or whatever, chalk marker, whatever. So you would mark the 5/8 on this side, and then you just lay, because now the cut edge on this does not have the seam allowance, this is the sewing line, you butt that up to the chalk line, and then you just sew 1 or 2 rows of stitching that catch that seam allowance that's now just on one side that's underneath that layer. Does that make sense? It's a fantastic way to do things, and actually it's very easy to do with leather too, although this is an unlined jacket, so if you're doing stuff with leather, you would need to underline it, which is where you just put a piece of fabric behind it and you sew it together as one, and then that would have to be non-ravelly. Leather wouldn't work. That would be a lot of work. But anything that does not ravel, because leather would just be very sticky, is fantastic. Now, the pattern does call, it's not a reversible coat pattern, I just made it that way, because it does have hem allowances included that go all the way around the coat that I actually just cut off, and I bound my edges so that it could easily be reversible. And it is reversible. Now, my fabric is not, it does ravel rather badly actually. And so what I did is I did flat fell seams, and I actually have a video, I'll pop a link on how to do flat felled seams on jeans, and it's the same principle. Basically you're sewing things together, wrong sides together at 5/8 of an inch, and then you trim one side down fairly short, and then you just wrap the other seam allowance over so everything is nice and secured, and that's what I did on this jacket, except around the neck edge. So let's talk about the jacket. Okay, I do have Gidget here with me. Can you see her furry lips? You want to say hi? Huh? You want to say hi? Here. Gidget says hello. We've just been out taking, taking film footage and pictures outside. So she was roaming around outside while we were doing that. It is very cold outside. Okay, so let's talk about the jacket. Again, this is a double-sided wool. So it's got this check on one side, and a herringbone on the other side. So, like I said, I did flat fell seams. Now, this jacket about killed me. Only because this is actually a very simple pattern. There is a front piece, there is a pocket piece, there is a back piece, there is a sleeve. That is it. 4 pattern pieces. And there's more than that, because there's also a template for the pocket if you want that you can cut out of like cardboard to make it easy to press the curved edges because it's a patch pocket. And then there's also a back facing that I just omitted because I made mine reversible, so I just omitted the back facing. So I only used 4 pattern pieces. It's a very simple coat to construct. Again, I did flat fell seams, which as you can see, find one here. And I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it real great on this fabric. That's the pocket. It just basically, makes, just like the inside of jeans, it just makes a really nice clean finish on both sides of the coat. So I did flat fell, and it was very easy attaching the sleeve that way. You attach the sleeve flat, and then you sew up the whole side seam. However, this stuff frayed like crazy, and this fabric is pretty thick. I really wish, if I were to do this again with this fabric, I would have made my seam allowances larger. Because of the turn of the cloth, and it was so bulky, I had a really hard time getting it tucked under there, and it was raveling like crazy. So that was very trying, and heaven forbid, a couple of times I had to unpick things and then everything just unraveled like crazy. So it was one of those. Now once it's all sewn, we're good to go. But I was fighting this big time under my machine. Again, that was just because I wasn't thinking. Now with the shoulders, across, you do a seam where it goes across the shoulders, and then because this neck piece is part of the front, so it connects the back to the front, it's like all one seam that goes from one arm's eye all the way across the back to the other shoulder point. I could not get this flat felled. I had to unpick it a couple times. It started unraveling. So I had already sewn it right sides together, and I was going to do the flat fell seam. And again, there's a corner there that's just kind of hard to get into with what I was trying to do. So I just took a piece of leather and I just stitched it down on top. I trimmed the seam allowance down somewhat, and then I just stitched on either side a 3/4 inch strip that just goes right across that seam line, so to keep all of my raw edges nice and enclosed. And it's leather, so it moves and bends and all that kind of thing. So that is kind of a design detail on the houndstooth side of the jacket. One of my lovely viewers suggested when I talked about binding the edges, oh, you should use some of that thrifted leather and bind the your edges with leather. I'm like, well, that's a fantastic idea. So I did that. I actually went thrifting on Saturday. It was half price day at Goodwill with my friend Jenny. We did not buy much at all, although I did grab a couple of leather coats to use for scraps, one of which was the perfect color brown for this. And it was in kind of rough shape, but I just wanted to cut the leather up into strips. So I was able to do standard binding on the sleeves, where I just sewed it right sides together, and then I turned it over, tucked it under, and then sewed it down on the other side, which is all well and good. And this is pretty thin leather. However, when I got to the front of the coat, because you have to miter your corners like you would if you were doing a quilt binding, and oh my gosh, this did not want to do that because it's leather, and it was just not wanting to fold under. So what I ended up doing, I'd already sewn it right sides together, and I did the little like quilt miter like you would do. I ended up just folding it over and stitching it down. I did not fold it under on the other side. So on the herringbone side, I just cut the leather really close to the stitching line. And I mean, it's fine, it's leather. Like, I think that's a fine finishing, but this almost killed me trying to feed this through my sewing machine, mostly because my presser foot would not raise high enough to get, like, especially the corners where I was trying to miter with the thick wool and the leather. Oh my gosh. I didn't have any issues with breaking needles. Actually, I used the same size 16 needle all the way through and had no problems. And again, this would have been easier had I used something else for the binding, but the leather does really look good. So thank you, whoever made that suggestion. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it really does make the coat look nice and expensive. So I really love the finished result. It was just getting to the finished result that was about put me under. For the pockets, I actually put patch pockets on both sides. I sewed them down on one side, and then I just turned the coat over. Again, my stitching, because this is nice lofty wool, my stitching got lost in the fabric, so you can't even see the stitching on the other side. So I just really carefully lined the other patch pocket up on top, and I used a little double stick tape, Wonder tape, and to stick it in place, because I didn't want to, pins would have distorted it a little bit. And I just kind of set it down on top of, I have to look very closely for the stitching line from where I sewed it on the other side to cover that up. And then I just stitched it down again. And I mean, if you look super closely on, can't remember which side I stitched down first, you can see, I mean, my lines are not, they're a little wonky, my stitching lines, where you can see where I stitched down the second one. But, it's not, I mean, again, it gets lost in the fabric. You have to really, really look. Yeah, you have to really, really look. So, I'm going to call it a win. And I have pockets, inside pockets and outside pockets. Okay, I loved sewing this. Again, this would have been such an easy pattern if I had sewed it the correct way. And again, like with all sewing workshop patterns, her instructions are just fantastic. And a lapped seam, like that's just a different technique, and I really want to try it with the lapped seam. And actually, hold on one second. Okay, I have this scrap of that mohair fabric that I showed you, and because it's kind of, sorry Gidget, it's, I mean it would unravel if you like really pick at it, but I think if I cut, because it's mohair, so it's very almost felted on one side, but I think if I stitched close enough to the edge, that I could do the lapped seam, good gracious, the lapped seam with the mohair that I showed you guys on Tuesday. And I want to do the jacket length, so the shorter length. So I really want to make this pattern up again. Now, sewing workshop patterns, I wear a size medium in their pants and in all of their tops. However, I noticed when I made the Brando jacket, and I was able to try all these on when I was in Topeka. When I did the Brando jacket, I sized down to a size small. I find that the garments that they do that are supposed to have more ease, like a coat or a jacket that have more ease in them naturally, I can actually size down to a small, and those fit me well. So I made a small in this. So I would say if this was something you were interested in doing, definitely look at the finished measurements there, and you probably want to size down, unless you just want a really, really oversized coat. But I mean, still, this is pretty oversized. Hopefully I've been showing you, I should have been showing you me in the coat both ways. I am super stoked with how this turned. I mean, it feels like I'm wearing a blanket. And again, the pattern was so easy, but not overly simplified. It's not one of those basic patterns, like it's got enough interest in it. And again, you could do your seams, there's a million ways you could do your seams. You could do, well, you could sew it just as is if you wanted to and just serge your seams, because there is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance included in the entire jacket. You could sew it with the lap seams like they've got, or you could kind of do what I did here along the shoulder, and you could bind off your seams with silk or with leather if you wanted to, although again, just be prepared. You're gonna have to muscle it through in points. Actually, sewing this part down wasn't that bad. It was the binding that about did me in. I had a horrible backache. So before I had my ergonomic chair that I've got at my sewing machine, actually, and it was before I had my industrial machine. So when my sewing machine sat on a table, so I was I was sewed like this, like with my arms up, because it was just high enough that I had to sew kind of like with my shoulders up. I got a pain, even just doing that, motion right in the center right of my back. Same spot. Horrible pain. I get muscle spasms and everything. So I had to be very careful how long I sat at my sewing machine, which we should all watch. I mean, just for health reasons, you want to get up and move around. But when I got my machine that is in the table, so my industrial machine that's back here that actually sits in the table, I sew at a right angle now, and I could literally sit at that thing for hours and hours and hours and not have any back issues at all. Now, when I was sewing this baby, I must have been super tense like this, trying to get like the leather to go through, because by the time I was done, oh gosh, a couple nights ago now, I was like laying completely prone on the couch when my husband came home, and he's like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my back is spasming so bad. I haven't had that for so long, but I'm sure that's what it was." I was just very tense the whole time I was trying to sew through the leather, because again, you don't really get many second chances with leather, because once the hole, the needle has pierced the leather, it's pierced. It doesn't go back. It doesn't close back up like it would on fabric. So you get one chance. You really can't unpick leather very easily. It'll just shred after a while. So it was an adventure, but I love this coat. It is like wearing a blanket. I can't wait to make this pattern again. And I think this pattern would be gorgeous in any kind of lightweight material as well. It'd be good in fleece too, because that doesn't ravel either. Anyway, my mind's going like a million miles an hour, and now I'm sitting here staring at the fabric stash that I've just inherited, wondering what in there also doesn't unravel, and what else can I make this amazing little jacket out of? Anyway, it is just a phenomenal little pattern. I highly recommend it. I will leave a link down below. It is not affiliate. I don't get anything if you purchase the pattern, but I will leave a link to the pattern down below and to the fabric. The fabric is an affiliate link. I get that. This was Minerva Fabric, and I do blog posts for them in exchange. So the blog post for this will be going up on their site. I don't know if it'll go up before the end of the year or if it'll be early next year, but I'm super in love with it. This fabric is amazing. It is a wool blend. It is very, very soft. It is not scratchy. I mean, it's a blanket. It is literally a blanket, and I feel like this pattern was perfect for creating a blanket coat, basically. I don't even know which way is up at the moment. Yeah, I mean, the coat pattern is a little bit fabric hungry because there is a lot of volume in it, but it's a balanced plaid. The check is well, is it? Maybe it's not balanced, but it was not hard to match my side seams, to match the plaid. And again, I actually cut my back out. That's another thing. The pattern has you cutting the back out 2 pieces with a center back seam, but I cut mine out on the fold. I took that seam allowance out and cut mine out on the fold, so I didn't have to try and match the plaid across the center back. I mean, but really you're just matching across the center back and then across the side seams. And it's a plaid. It's pretty straightforward. But yeah, I just took that out so I wouldn't have to worry about that at all. And yeah, worked perfectly. So that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed my reversible coat. I am so excited. Let me know if you have any questions on the process. It really was not hard at all. It was just about seam finishes, really, is what it all kind of came down to. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Let's see, Sunday I've got the very last of Vogue 1643 up on the channel, which is that sew along. And then next week we start McCall's 8011. I'm going to be taking apart a leather coat that I thrifted in order to make that pattern. And I'm not sure what I'm gonna bring for you guys on Tuesday. I'm getting ready to do a lot of filming though, because I wanna take the holidays off. The whole, I don't have to worry about doing any sewing or any filming or anything between Christmas and New Year's, but I want videos to go up per normal. So I'm gonna have to do a bunch of videoing next week because that next week's the last week I have till the kids get off school, and then I'm pretty much I can do a few odds and ends, but I'm pretty much done at that point. So I'll be doing a lot of batch filming next week in order to keep you guys all up to date, 3 videos a week throughout the new year. All right, that's all I've got for today. I will see you guys on Sunday and then again on Tuesday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and get some sewing in. I'll see you then. Bye.